views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Adrienne Austin, Deputy Chancellor for the Division of Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications, and I will be your moderator for this virtual community meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight for this important information session about New York City's plans to return to school. It's important that all of our families are able to participate tonight, and we are very grateful to the Spanish and Mandarin interpreters who are with us on a separate line. Thank you to Yailin, Montiel, and Benito Quezada, who are our Spanish interpreters. Thank you to Zhao Chun Yang and Yudi Wu, who are our Mandarin interpreters. And thank you to the Office of Sign Language Interpreting Services for providing American Sign Language at this meeting. We will now announce instructions in Spanish and Mandarin for attendees who may wish to dial into the interpretation lines at this time. Yailin, can you please provide the instructions in Spanish?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. The following message is going to be in Spanish, offering interpretation services. Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por estar acá. Si desea servicios de interpretación en español, por favor, marque desde su teléfono al 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de PIN 735-255-0102, numeral. Le repito, marque desde su teléfono al 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de conferencia 735-255-0102, numeral. Si desea escuchar audio en español, pero desea permanecer en esta sala de conferencia virtual de Zoom para poder ver la reunión desde su computadora, por favor, silencie todos sus dispositivos y disminuya el volumen de su computadora, teléfono a la línea de español. Nuevamente, el número es 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de conferencia 735-255-0102, numeral. Gracias.
Thank you, Yailin. Zhao Chun Yang, can you please provide the instructions in Mandarin?
Sure. Good evening. So the following instruction is in Mandarin. 讲普通话的家长请拨打电话888-475-4499，请输入密码933-059-6663井号键。我再重复一遍，电话号码是888-475-4499，密码是933-059-6663井号键。请大家在会议期间将自己的电脑和手机保持静音状态。我再重复一遍，电话是888-475-4499，密码是933-059-6663。谢谢 ，Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Adrienne Austin, and I am your moderator for this evening, and I'm really excited about this citywide family and student information session. I'm also excited to let you know that we will be hosting a Spanish language information session with the Chancellor next Tuesday, September 1st from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That information session will be entirely in Spanish. We will also be hosting an event with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene next week on Wednesday, September 2nd from 6:30 to 8 p.m. The links to register for both events are live on our website, so please go to www.schools.nyc.gov to sign up and attend. I will now provide details on how tonight's community meeting will work. We have received over 3,000 questions in advance of this meeting, and we've identified commonly raised issues which we will try to address tonight. If your question does not get answered tonight, or if you have additional questions, please check the DOE website, which has the most up-to-date return to school information at www.schools.nyc.gov/school year 2021. Or contact your child's school. Thank you all for being here tonight. It is now my honor and my privilege to introduce our New York City School Chancellor, Richard Carranza.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin, and I want to say good evening to everyone. I'm very glad that you're able to join us here this evening. I'd like to share a few remarks, and then I'd like to get to our questions that have been submitted. So September's here, and we know in New York City that means that so is the start of the school year. But we also know that this school year will be like no other we have ever experienced. Some things will stay the same. School will be in session in September, and we're all getting ready for it, even if it's going to look different. The team here is working around the clock to finalize operations for the fall, and I'm happy to be able to share some new information with you all this evening, especially around using outdoor space, our plans for air safety, and how we're preparing to support our children's well-being when they return to school. One thing that you can count on and bank on, health and safety will continue to always come first for our students, our staff, and our families. So as a lifelong educator, I know that students are much more likely to learn and feel safe and rebound from tough blows when they feel connected to their teachers and their peers. Supporting students socially and emotionally improves their academic progress and prepares them to succeed in life. Even before this pandemic, the majority of our students face trauma every day. And let me tell you why that's true. Poverty is traumatic. Homelessness is traumatic. Fear of deportation is traumatic. Yet schools can do so much to help students learn how to manage their stress and find refuge from their pain and anxiety. And we demonstrated that in New York City. Now, after the added trauma and upheaval of this pandemic, when safety required that we abruptly close our school buildings and limit our in-person interactions through social distancing, rebuilding those personal connections and honoring our students' lived experience is more important than ever. That's one of the biggest reasons why we're going to such great lengths to welcome students back into our schools this fall, not physically and virtually, while strengthening our social and emotional support to student learning. Our students are the heartbeat of our schools, and we have worked hard to build and strengthen social and emotional supports in New York City schools for the entire time that I have served as chancellor and throughout this administration. That includes the historic effort that the mayor, first lady, and I announced just over a year ago to provide all elementary school students, let me repeat that, all elementary school students with restorative social emotional learning, and every middle and high schooler with restorative practices aimed at strengthening community, building character, and creating the conditions to heal. So I'm pleased to let you know that yesterday the mayor and I announced new ways that we will be providing these vital supports to our staff and students, but tailored to address the disruptions that we all have confronted in the recent months. Foremost among those initiatives is a curriculum that we are calling the Bridge to School Plan that will provide all schools with social emotional learning lessons and activities designed for the first few weeks of school. As students are re-entering school communities, some of them re-entering buildings they abruptly left in March, or navigating a brand new building, not the building they left in March, but a whole new building. These materials and lessons will help students to build coping skills, process the grief that they have felt, reconnect, and allow our students to orient themselves to learning online or in a classroom during the first few weeks of school. In addition, with the generous support of the Robin Hood Foundation, the Gray Foundation, and the Tiger Foundation, we are expanding access to training in trauma-responsive educational practices. I want to thank the Fund for Public Schools for being a real catalyst at bringing our philanthropic partners to the table. Every New York City principal started this training this summer, and we will expand it to offer it to all staff as the school year begins. Already 5,000 of our teachers have been trained, and all of our teachers will be trained before the first day with students begins. Finally, in partnership with the Child Mind Institute, we will launch a helpline for educators and school staff to be able to call to consult on best practices and classroom strategies for assisting students with their mental health and wellness. This line will be staffed by mental health professionals, and this hotline will help schools get immediate answers to urgent questions and concerns that they have for their students. Together through these efforts, we will rebuild our connections and restore our school communities this fall, whether students are on site or online, and help New York City students rebuild a strong and healthy future. As the largest school district in the country by far, and the only major urban district in the position to even consider public schools for in-person instruction, our focus on social emotional learning is another way in which we are setting the gold standard during this unprecedented time. Now, I know it's been in the news quite a bit lately, air safety. And we have always said, and we hold ourselves to our word, the health and safety of our school communities is our number one priority. So we are proud of the work that we have done all summer, not just this week, not just these past few days, all summer, to get our classrooms ready. Now, in addition to our own DOE safety checks, every single space will also be inspected by a school ventilation action team. It's an additional step to check our work, if you will, assurance to our community that the classrooms will be ready to go. Each action team is made up of an independent ventilation expert and a professional engineer that is certified and contracted by the School Construction Authority to walk through each and every room where learning will happen. The FDNY, our fire department, the Department of Buildings, and our hardworking DOE custodial engineers will also contribute to inspecting and walking through each space to make sure it's ready for use on day one. Each classroom in our schools must pass a checklist with important details like room size and occupancy, with proper social distancing, windows and whether they can open, or if we have more work to do on those windows, an examination of supply fans and exhaust fans. Each action team will also give us their honest take and professional opinion. They're going to report back to us which spaces have a clean bill of health and which issues we must address. And we in the DOE will take those findings and do one of three things. One, the room is fine, ready to go. And we know we've been at work on ventilation all summer. We expect this to be by and large the most prevalent result. But two, if the room needs some repairs or adjustments, we'll make all the necessary changes to ensure sufficient ventilation in that room before the first day of school. Or three, we'll take the room offline until repairs can be made. We will not put staff or students in a room that does not have the appropriate safe ventilation. We're in motion already, ready to make good on these promises, and have purchased 10,000 plus portable air filters for nurses' offices, isolation rooms, and any rooms that these inspections reveal need additional circulation. And I want to repeat, if inspections find that an entire school or a particular room does not have adequate ventilation, we will not allow anyone to use those spaces until they are made safe. These inspections started 2 days ago on August 25th, and they will be completed by next week, September 1st. So we will begin posting the results later this week for the public to see, and we'll have all results online by September 4th, well in advance of the first day of school. All students and staff will be teaching and learning in safe spaces with proper ventilation. That is our promise to you, and we will keep that word. The science is clear that well-ventilated buildings are safer buildings, and these action teams will help make that happen. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room. I know that there's been a lot of videos on Twitter and on Facebook and a lot of people talking about toilet paper on a stick. And how can that possibly measure ventilation? There are two components to measuring air ventilation. One is, do you have airflow? Is the air moving? And the second is, what is the quality of the air? The quality of the air is checked by CO2 machines. You cannot do that without people in the room. We have a plan for doing that once we have our students and staff in the room. But before you can even do that, you need to make sure that there is ventilation, there is air flowing. And by the way, the toilet paper on a stick is one of the recommended procedures from the CDC. That's one of the ways you check flow of air in a confined space. We do it in our schools, we do it in our hospitals. But for someone to say that checking flow with a piece of toilet paper on a stick is the same thing as saying that if the water from your faucet is hot, you can't check whether it's too hot by putting your hand in the hot water. That you need a machine to measure the temperature of the water. It's just not credible. Yes, it measures the flow, and yes, it's approved by the CDC, and yes, we're using it as one of many things we're doing to measure airflow. So please, let's stop with the toilet paper videos. It's not helpful, it's not accurate, and quite frankly, it's just not what the recommendations from the CDC recommend. Now, there's also been questions about supplies. I know that a lot of you are concerned about whether schools will have enough supplies. I want to assure you in this very public space that everyone is making sure that schools have what they need to open schools safely, and that continues to be our top priority. So just to give you a sense of the numbers, here's what we've ordered so far. And let me underline that. So far. More will be reordered and replenished on a rolling basis. So we've already ordered and started delivering 3.5 million plus bottles of hand sanitizer. We've already ordered, received, and started distributing 80,000 plus canisters of disinfectant wipes. We've already ordered, received, and begun distributing 30,000 plus cases of disposable gloves in multiple sizes. We've also had over 210,000 social distancing signage, the floor decals where we put them 6 feet apart to remind children and everyone how far apart they should be. We've delivered over 4,000 goggles, over 151,000 face shields, over 45,000 gallons of disinfectant. We've already received and delivered to the schools 3,750 of the electrostatic sprayers, the most current technology on the market. We've already ordered, received, and started distributing over 2 million isolation gowns, part of the personal protection equipment. And we have over 70,000 protective suits that have been delivered to school sites. It's important for you to know that we are offering all school staff medical grade masks and face shields and the N95 face masks to nurses and those staff that are staffing the isolation rooms. We will also have available masks and face coverings for students. Again, what's been misinterpreted in some corners is this following fact. We are committed that on every day, every school will have a 30-day supply of all of these materials. That doesn't mean they get a 30-day supply and we wait for it to dwindle down to zero. No, every day they will have 30-day supply. As they use it on that day, other supplies will be delivered to them to replenish it. So every day they have 30 days on hand. Okay, so please, again, when you hear that it's only 30 days, what are you going to do after the 30 days? No, it's 30-day every day, ready to go, in the bank, if you will. Outdoor spaces. I want to thank all of our parents and community members and elected officials and even business people that have engaged us in identifying and developing creative solutions to maximizing space and social distancing and advocating for the use of outdoor space. Thanks to all of you and your hard work and collaboration between and among various city agencies, I'm very pleased to let you know that this week we announced our Outdoor Learning Initiative. And the Outdoor Learning Initiative will allow the use of outdoor space for classes with an emphasis on those that require additional spacing per public health guidance, such as physical education classes, dance, theater, chorus, band classes. I'm being joined here tonight by my colleague, Deputy Chancellor Karen Goldmark, and Karen will provide more details about how our outdoor learning will work in just a few minutes. But it's exciting, and I know that it will make going to school an even richer experience for our students. Now, again, I want to clarify, in the models that principals have submitted and schools have submitted about what their school will look like this fall, many of our schools have already requested to use their own outdoor space because they have outdoor space. Those have been approved. We're talking about schools that would like to shut the street down next to their school, or would like to have for a portion of the day the front street of the school shut down, or maybe to set up a series of classrooms in a park. Those are the kinds of things that instead of having our principals have to navigate the city bureaucracy and work with the Department of Transportation or the NYPD or the FDNY or the parks, We all as sister agencies have now flattened the bureaucracy so that when a school says we want to use this particular space, we will navigate the bureaucracy and get an answer to the schools very quickly about what is possible and not possible. In addition, and I'm almost done here, instructional guidance. Last but not least, I want to thank our principals and their staffs who are out there doing the tough work on planning. Each and every day, they are hard at work planning. Our whole city commends and thanks them, and our school leaders and teachers are top notch. They've taken a totally unprecedented situation and they've tackled it with creativity, innovation, and lots of tenacity. As they do, they bring us more questions about what this means for the various roles that make up the school community. And this year, asking key questions about what this means for the teachers in many modes, which they'll teach and impact our students. Blended learning students learning in person on-site schools. They've also asked about blended learning students learning remotely from home, and fully remote learning students learning from home every day. So we're happy to have worked closely with our labor partners to provide more of those answers today in the form of the new instructional guidance that the mayor mentioned. And later this evening, our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Linda Chen, will share details with you. The guidance provides clarity and flexibility to our principals. It also provides consistency and support in the learning experience that students will receive every day, no matter where a student is learning from. For the hours in a remote, in a day that a remote student will be receiving live instruction, to the ways that teachers can come together to coordinate and collaborate across classes of students, today's agreement moves us forward by providing a shared educational vision and the foundation for a strong start to the school year. We know our principals and school staffs have been working hard all summer to get ready for September. So today we're excited to take this next step for all of our students and to provide additional clarity and support for our dedicated educators who will make this upcoming school year the greatest one yet. Before I hand it back over to our Deputy Chancellor, Adrian Austin, I just want to remind everyone that we'll be holding a couple of more sessions next week. On Tuesday, September 1st, tendremos una sesión informativa para familias y estudiantes sobre el regreso a la escuela en español. No Spanish translation required, Yalin. This will be a fully Spanish information session, completely in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking families. Para nuestras familias hispanoparlantes sería una sesión completamente en español, el día 1 de septiembre. On Wednesday, September 2nd, returning to school, the latest guidance from our health experts will be another session where we will have all of our health experts with us to answer questions that you may have regarding the medical questions on returning to school. And to our families with students with individual education plans in our District 75 school community, please know that your children are also incredibly important to us. So we're in the process of scheduling conversations with the D75 and special education community, and those details will be finalized in the next few days. Please check our website for additional information, schools.nyc.gov, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. So with that, I'd like to toss it back over to our Deputy Chancellor, Adrian Austin.
Thank you, Chancellor. I know many of our families were excited to hear your announcement earlier this week that we will be utilizing outdoor spaces for learning, and we've received a lot of questions about that. I'm so happy that our Deputy Chancellor, Karen Goldmark, is here with us to answer those questions. But before we dive into the questions, Deputy Chancellor Goldmark, can you tell us a little bit about the Outdoor Learning Initiative?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin, and thank you everyone for participating tonight. The Outdoor Learning Initiative is intended to really leverage the outdoor space and the opportunities that provides to ensure that our children can have the richest possible experience in school. So several activities that are really near and dear to students and families' hearts: band, physical education, arts education, require even more space than social distancing under normal circumstances. So in some cases, there's a requirement for vigorous physical education activity for 12 feet of space between students. And with all of that, and with all of the space that's available, and with the success of the restaurants initiative that we've all seen that has allowed us in many cases to return to restaurants for the first time in months and months, the Outdoor Learning Initiative will make use of schoolyards, streets, playgrounds, probably not as much, and parks available for learning, for physical education, for band, and for additional academic classes as seen fit by principals and where safe and feasible. As the Chancellor said, safety is our absolute top priority. So we will not have situations where students are just in streets. These have to be approved in advance by the Department of Education and the Department of Transportation. We're working with our sister agencies, parks. But what we've said is that for any school that wishes to pursue outdoor learning, we will work our hardest to get to yes. No more bureaucratic red tape. No more we'll think about it for months on end. For every school that sends an application by this Friday, by tomorrow, we will have an answer by next Friday, September 4th, so a 5-day turnaround. And we've already sent out, I believe it's 53 with another 100 going tonight, approvals for the applications we've already received. So if your school is interested in outdoor learning, and we understand this isn't great for every school. There are schools on major thoroughfares. There are schools right opposite subway stations where it's very loud. We're not assuming this is every single school community's answer, but some schools that wish to pursue this, there is a survey link that we've provided to principals. They can fill out the information form, and we are turning it around as quickly as possible to provide positive answers wherever we possibly can.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor. And a follow-up question to that, if schools don't make the Friday, August 28th timeline, can they still submit an application? How does it work?
Thank you for asking. Absolutely. So the Friday timeline is just to get the first wave through. So if a school applies by tomorrow, they'll have an answer the following Friday. We are committing to having that weekly turnaround. So the following Friday, any schools that apply by then will get it the Friday after. And this is something that a school can decide it wants to do as a community after school already starts. So we're not going to shut this off when school starts. This will be available to you. You don't have to decide to do this now. It's not a deadline. It's just a window. And our commitment is really around the turnaround. So when you get it to us, we will turn it around to you by the following Friday.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go right into the questions from parents. Our first question is from Margie Kuo from Stuyvesant, and she wants to know, why doesn't DOE use tented outdoor spaces and or convention spaces like Jacob Javits to accommodate social distancing in-person instruction? And her second question is, if New York City, or the second part of that question is, if New York City was able to do that for field hospitals, why not consider this for schools?
So New York City is considering every single possible available space across the city to use for in-person instruction. We are absolutely considering outdoor space, as you've just heard. And in the case of Stuyvesant, there is actually a park literally outside the door of the school. So we are totally open to that. In the case of indoor spaces that are not currently schools, we in conjunction with the School Construction Authority have been looking all over the city. We have an email address that is escaping me right now that I will provide you. I think it's leasing@sca.nyc.org, where people can tell us suggestions for places we should look at. We've looked at Broadway theaters, we've looked at gyms, we've looked at churches. In many, many cases, indoor spaces have challenges that are far in excess of what New York City schools have in the way of airflow and ventilation. So most of the spaces we've looked at that aren't already schools are not great options. We are continuing to look, and we're following down all kinds of leads in order to maximize in-person instruction. And don't be surprised if you see people out there looking at all kinds of spaces in your community, because we are all over the city.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Kathleen Kraus-Schertzer from Frank McCourt High School, and she wants to know, can the city close off streets to provide outdoor learning like they did for restaurants?
Yes, so that is actually the effort we're making with the Department of Transportation. I will note that we are approving these so long as they're safe and feasible. So we are very much in favor of having students be outside as much as practicable. We also, though, recognize that there are safety measures that have to be in place that go beyond what restaurants would need. So I just want to sound a note of caution, because as a public school parent myself of a child whose school does not have outdoor space, Of course, I would love there to be outdoor learning. However, it also has to be in a way that is safe. So we are looking at closing off streets, but we will not have children in traffic. So there are trade-offs here in terms of how we do it.
Thank you, DC Goldmark. It's important for families to know that we have been serving students in person in our school buildings since the spring through regional enrichment centers, and you led the oversight of those sites. And so we have a few of our rec principals and staff here with us tonight, but can you share with us before we turn to them, how did you ensure health and safety in those school buildings, in those sites?
Well, the real answer is through the heroes you're about to hear from. The site supervisors of the recs have been just the most amazing group of people I've ever worked with. Totally committed to keeping New York City going through a very challenging hour. And I will say that we work together to constantly update our practices based on the guidance of our public health experts. As the science emerged, we changed the practices. And one of the things we started from the very beginning before we even opened was social distancing. So we made sure we had 6 feet between the children. The rec site supervisors invented games for when children play outside that naturally had within the game keeping social distancing so that children could have fun and still be safe and healthy and keep their entire families healthy. The rec site supervisors invented all kinds of activities for students to do that keep social distancing in place. And if you're lucky enough to have in your school someone who worked in a rec, they'll be coming in with a wealth of resources and practices. It's really those core 4: keeping social distance, wearing a mask, washing hands frequently, and staying home when you're sick. Those 4 things really kept it going, and we did not have any clusters in recs. We had a very, very, very wonderful experience in terms of health and safety at the recs. And that really, again, wasn't me. It was all of the people working in the recs, but it is an honor to work with them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now I'm going to turn to our rec heroes. We have with us Santiago Taveras, Deborah Tessiotis, Brett Schneider, and Stephanie Fugel. And I'm going to ask for each of you all to share your experiences in working in the rec site, starting with Santiago. Santiago, if you could tell us, I know you were in the Bronx operating a site there. Tell us about your experience.
Hi, good evening. Buenas noches todos participantes. Yeah, I absolutely love my rec, and I know that that's something that we do every week on our calls, but besides the obvious that Karen mentioned, the not so obvious, I think, is the most important. The custodial staff is amazing in cleaning everything before even anybody comes in the building. So we already feel safe and comfortable in that space. So I think every day the custodial staff is there before 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure that we're safe. So for me, that was the number one thing, making sure, because I have 3 kids and a wife, right? I don't want to come home sick, and making sure that we were all safe and that we took all precautions before the families and kids came in the building, that we were ready to receive them.
Thank you. And can you share with us, what were the students' experiences like, and how did staff work with the students, and how did families become part of the school community? How were you able to create that community in the site?
Well, at the very beginning, there was a lot of hesitation. I had tears from parents that were not sure if they were leaving their kids in a safe space. We started averaging about 24 kids. Now we average almost 70 kids, and a lot of it is word of mouth. Oh, this is a great place to bring your kids. We have a carnival every Friday, donated by friends and family and colleagues, so the prices that the kids get, and that became a thing. Tomorrow, unfortunately, is our last carnival, but it became a thing. Once school year ended, we have a football field outside of the space, so we use that. I bought some hoses. We have sprinklers going on, so every day, for 1 hour in the afternoon, the smaller kids go out between 1 and 2. The older kids go out between 2 and 3. They bring a change of clothes. Parents volunteer and bring food and gifts and things. And I haven't been thanked as many times in my 30-year career than I have been since March 23rd when this started. It's been amazing. And today, unfortunately, one of the kids had gone to Florida. So when she came back, I didn't know she was going to Florida. I had to tell Dad she had to be quarantined according to the state. And it was the first time that it hit me. These are my babies, and I am going to miss them so much. And the feeling was mutual. I mean, Dad and I were outside for a little while before they left, but it has become a very tight-knit community.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for serving our students in the Bronx. We have with us Deborah Tassiotis. Deborah, I know you were serving students in New York City. Can you talk to us about your rec site and your experience?
Sure. So I've had the privilege to serve as a site leader, as one of the site leaders at the rec at PS 133 near the Barclays Center. I think next Friday is going to be our 120th day together as a community. When I first got the call to volunteer, I didn't realize it would be serving alongside so many committed staff, so many amazing substitute teachers and paraprofessionals, nurses, our social worker who's outstanding, our safety agent and food service personnel, and the custodial staff. Like, I don't know if they ever leave. They are really the unsung heroes that are there working around the clock to make sure that our building is safe. One of the first days our school was open, I was giving a hesitant parent, like Santiago mentioned, a tour of the rec. And we visited a couple of classrooms. And she paused in the hallway and like very overwhelmed with emotion because our rec was cleaner than her hospital. She's a surgeon. And we have tried to hold on to that every single day that we've been a rec. And I think that we've managed to. The like cleanliness, and the positive focus on social distancing and hand washing and just taking care of one another and keeping each other safe. Have a lot of fun on the playground and in the classrooms.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And just to dig a little deeper into the fun, talk to me about the kids. What's their experience been like? What does it look like? And how's it gone with the children's experience?
So we begin our day with outdoor time. I think it's important before a day of remote learning or before a day of academics, as we've sort of been through the life of the rec in remote learning, in our own academics, and now picking up remote learning again for some of our children. We also, we've focused on literacy skills. We've had some amazing STEM programming. We've got like a rockets and rovers thing going on right now. And we have a lot of enrichment activities, dance, movement class. We have a wellness class that incorporates like some Tai Chi and martial arts. We have gardening, which has been a tremendous big hit. It takes a few more minutes to sanitize and get all the things ready, but it's worth it. We've had improv, photography, step class, and it's really been driven by student interest and the talents of our staff.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your service to our students. I want to now bring in Stephanie. Stephanie, you come with a little bit of a different lens. You're a social worker. Can you talk to us about social emotional learning and practices and how you brought that to bear in the rec site that you were in Queens?
Hi, good evening, everybody. So from, our experience at our rec is that the kids are pretty resilient and they're pretty adaptive. And, kids took on to, the new things of social distancing and wearing their masks pretty quickly. And, when they really built a community within their classrooms and within our rec site. So we were able to go into the rooms and really teach kids, coping skills and talk about what's going on and how they're feeling and just kind of process, life with them. And the kids have been really awesome, when it's really like takes a village. It's a whole team effort at our site, from our site supervisors to our teachers to the school safety agents and, the food servers. Everyone knows everyone. And, and everyone's kind of been just a lending ear and support. And, one thing I really realized is just how resilient kids really are.
Thank you. And you talked a little bit about getting kids used to wearing masks. Do you have any advice for parents who are preparing for blended learning, preparing for kids to come in the fall? What tips, what tricks did you guys use to get kids used to this mask wearing during the day?
Yeah, from our site, what we really noticed is that, it was kind of gentle reminders throughout the day, talking about teaching them why are we wearing our masks instead of just telling them. And kind of, we got it to be fun and exciting. We would all walk around, all the staff had different design masks, which kind of made it more exciting for them. They'd love to come in and see what mask, we're all wearing that day. We had different themes going on. So we're just kind of making it a more like funner experience. And then really just teaching them, the importance of it as opposed to just telling them and, answering their questions about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your experience tonight. We're now going to bring in Brett Schneider. Brett, you are not only a rec site supervisor, but you're also the principal of Bronx Collaborative High School, and you're planning for reopening there. Talk to us about your experience in the rec, and then how are you planning for reopening in your high school?
Thanks for asking. The rec experience has been really transformative and makes me kind of emotional because, as everybody has mentioned, as Santi else has mentioned, the custodians and the substitute teachers and parents have just been mind-blowingly amazing in the degree to which they have dug in to make things happen. The thing that I most learned from the REC's experience was how the building could be entirely reused in creative parallel ways, and how to take the project-based learning that has always been a part of my school community and really re-envision how many things, especially because we have a grand amount of space on our campus, to really look at the range of activities. I'll give you an example. During one week when we were studying how does a community, the essential question of how does a community grow through public celebration, we were able to have a parade around the quarter-mile floor. We were able to do a runway show where the kids were urging all the faculty to also join the runway show, realizing that a runway, you can have social distancing, especially with the long, long hallways. Realizing our music production and videography activities, that we can really use the space of the campus in a thoughtful way, having students carve out spaces. And that's also where the outdoor space becomes exciting. We have an exterior garden, an outdoor learning project that was in place, and that allowed students, again, to do nature-based studies and get some core STEM activities, drawing a transverse understanding, even as elementary students playing with some high school level concepts through really looking at the space in brand new ways. And for students, our edible garden was wondrous. Being able to see saw the rabbits running around, it was quite a beautiful experience. And it really made me think about the degree to which that can be done. Also how the hallway space can be used. When we did a unit on what does it really mean to celebrate independence and dug into Juneteenth and explored Black Lives Matter issues, we were able to use mural space and create murals utilizing art supplies, but to create what seemed like more permanent installations so that students could really see their work for months at a time hanging in public spaces, which again made me rethink how, even down to the hallway, rather than the hallway being where teachers hang student work, how students can take over classrooms, which helped me in my faculty redesigned our fall program to use an innovative model that cuts from 8 classes down to 4, that doubles the time of those classes, so that students can really be in 9-person pods, but take over their space, so that the room that those 9 students own and only trade off on with 9 other students during the entire year, they can install murals. They can create a level of homeness that balances out the spatial limitations. And so I think the RECs really taught me how to view space entirely differently and see how magical and relaxed a 9-person space can be, right, when you really sort of redesign your notions of what classrooms are about and where project-based learning can go.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you to all of our REC staff who shared your experiences. You guys led the work this summer. I don't know, Chancellor, if you want to get in and say some words about our RECs and our REC site staff.
Yeah, I had the opportunity and the privilege to visit several of our REC sites this summer, and everything you heard is just the tip of the iceberg. It was so caring, positive. It was more than a job. For every single one of our colleagues in these REC sites, it was really a calling, and they volunteered to do this. So I just want to say to them, thank you. We've learned a lot from what you've done. And I want to just thank you on behalf of all of our first responders, our essential workers, everyone that kept New York City working and moving during this pandemic in its early months. Thank you. With you, many people would not have been able to continue to serve this city we love. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I jump in for one moment because I forgot to acknowledge my partner in virtue as opposed to crime, Vanda Belusik from the Office of the First Deputy Chancellor. There was Vanda, there was Wanda, and there's Afsana, and the three of them really made the magic happen at Central, answering questions all times of day or night. Just really, that's the backstage crew of Rex, and I wanted to thank them too because they're the unsung heroes.
Thank you for adding that. That is the story of DOE staff from all of our schools, from the social workers, the custodian workers, the school food workers, our teachers, our principals, all the way up to Central and our district offices and borough offices. We have an amazing staff, I think the most talented staff in the country. And speaking of which, we are going to talk school food. We have a lot of questions about what's going to happen this year with school food. And so we have with us our Senior Executive Director of the Office of School Food and Nutrition, Christopher Tricarico. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our first question around school food is from Clara Batista from the Bronx, school 10X15. And she wants to know, how will the breakfast and lunch program run for students? And will they be eating in their lunchroom or in their classroom?
Thank you for that question, Deputy Chancellor Austin. So right now, all of our staff are meeting with every single principal in each school to determine what is best for each school. Breakfast and lunch will be served for students that are in session as well as students that are not in session. We will have takeout meals at every single school open for students to take meals home. The parents can also pick up meals for them. But you should check in definitely with the principal of the individual school to see what the plan is going to be like. We will have food delivered to some classrooms. There will be takeout stations throughout the building. We'll make sure that all food safety regulations are followed, but it's definitely a school-by-school decision, and most of the decisions have already been made. I believe we're pretty much through all the schools at this point, waiting for a few principals to return so we can finalize some decisions, but it's definitely a school-by-school decision. I can answer questions about that once we have more information from the schools, but it's looking pretty positive right now about how meals will be eaten during the school day, making sure students stay socially distanced as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And will all students have access to school food? And how will that work for the remote-only students and the students who are on a remote day?
All New York City students will have access to food. If they are in school, they will be served food in school. But every single building that has a kitchen that we serve will serve takeout meals. Students would need to register with their parents to select the school where they want to take out meals, come to the school every single day to receive breakfast and lunch.
Thank you. And last question, I know a lot of parents want to know cold food, hot food, and when is the menu coming out and where can they find it?
The menu will be coming out very soon. It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold for breakfast and for lunch. Just as a reminder, our nutritional standards are very the same for hot and cold food. We need to make sure as we're moving food throughout the building that it stays safe, and it's definitely safer at the moment to really start with cold food. We'll continue to evaluate what each school looks like and what the availability of different kinds of food in each school will be. But in September, you will see a cold menu for breakfast and lunch, and it'll be the same menu for the takeout meals that students that are not in session will receive.
Thank you, Chris. This question, I think, is for the Chancellor. The question comes from Karen Palmer McCain from Edward R. Murrow High School in District 21. And Karen wants to know, how will safety for students with food allergies be ensured if students are eating in the classrooms?
So again, we follow all of the safety protocols that are published by our school nutrition department. That training and those reminder guidance documents will be part of the back to school work that happens every single year. But again, this year, teachers will also be very much trained on that as well. So we're going to encourage parents who have children that have food allergies to make sure you've updated that information for us. I'm not sure if Chris or Selena want to also add to that, but we're going to make sure that we know who they are and what they are, and then continue to follow the protocols we have in place.
Chancellor, if I may, we definitely work closely with all school principals and the parents of each school. During the school year, parents submit information about allergies. That gets down to the kitchen, and my folks in the kitchen know the individual students and what their allergies are. So it's a real team effort, and it's a great effort done by principals as well as the kitchen staff and the parents to make sure children are safe every single day.
Thank you very much for that. And since we have some of our rec site staff with us, I'm going to pivot to them. If someone can answer the question around what did breakfast and lunch look like in the rec sites? So if Santiago or Deborah, if you guys want to weigh in on that, just to give folks an idea of what it's going to look like in the fall.
Sure.
Go ahead, Deborah.
So we serve breakfast, lunch, and supper in the classrooms. We have dedicated staff that bring the food around. We keep class lists with all the food allergy information and have signs in the doors as well. So the classroom staff or a student leader, they put on gloves, they sort of set up the meals inside the classroom. And then kids wash hands, which is really nice after a day of hand sanitizing, very refreshing. And then students have lunch together in the classroom and use that time either for sort of social emotional learning, morning meetings, talking about events in their lives that are coming up or past events or current events. Some of them use the time for watching science videos or, just building community with one another. And then we usually have a physical activity after, like a classroom dance party or a co-noodle activity.
Yeah, I just wanted to add everything that Deborah just said, but also the kitchen staff has the roster of every classroom and where the allergies at. So we work closely with them. So ditto to everything Deborah said. But I think the most important part is that they have the roster. They know who the kids are and know exactly what foods they can and cannot bring to certain rooms.
Thank you so much for giving us some real life experience on what it looks like. I want to turn back to Chris. We have a question from Carrie Steinmetz from District 2 in Manhattan, and she wanted to know, how will lunchtime be handled if indoor dining is illegal in New York City?
So a lot of cafeterias we're going to need for instructional space. So I think the plan that principals and the kitchen staff are really working on is where meals should be served. A lot of shared space is also going to be used for instruction. So we do know that a lot of classrooms will be where the dining experience does happen. We've had a lot of success over the years with breakfast in the classroom, and it's really taught us about how to eat inside the classroom. It's been a great collaboration with the UFT and all the other school partners that we have, including parents, about what it takes to eat in the classroom. So this was a great learning experience a couple of years ago, and we're putting it to practice throughout all schools in New York City now. But it's definitely a decision that principals can make with my staff to make sure that they're utilizing all of the space that's available for the dining experience. But we want to keep safety as the most important thing. And if the classrooms are the place where we can maintain social distancing, that's where the meals will be served and eaten.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Deputy Chancellor, if I could just add one little piece to what Chris has just said. But we just had a conversation with our medical experts about this very topic. And, I think logically people go to that space. You can't eat indoors, and how can you eat in a classroom? There are some real significant differences, not the least of which is that the medical experts have shared that we now have data from around the world where schools have opened, practiced social distancing, had lunch and breakfast eaten in a classroom, and there are no documented cases of spread or infection from any of those situations around the world. So the evidence is such that as long as you maintain all of the precautions, the sanitizing, the only taking off your mask when you're eating, keeping the social distancing, the hand washing immediately afterwards, you can successfully do that. And we also had that example from our rec centers here as well. The difference in an in-dining situation is that if you think about your meal, and I can have Chris double check me on the time here, but if you're eating in a classroom, it's not going to be more than 20 minutes that you're eating. Typically, when you go out into a dining situation, you're spending anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour eating. It's a much longer exposure. You add in all of the other things like maybe not following the social distancing. So it sounds like it's the same, but our medical experts have insisted that it's a very different experience if you follow all of the medical protocols, which you've heard we are absolutely planning on following.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. We have a question from Louis Crozat from IS-24, Mira Burns in Staten Island. And Luis wants to know, are water fountains going to be open during the school year? And if not, what plans are in place to maintain students properly hydrating themselves throughout the school day? So Chancellor, I'm not sure if you want to talk to Ursula.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for that question. So obviously it's incredibly important that our students are hydrating, and we will not be turning off the water fountains. We will be, these are high touch point areas. We'll be cleaning them regularly. And we also, many of our kitchens, and I believe almost all of our kitchens have water jets. So we know that students can also get water in the cafeterias as well, but we will not are actually drinking, because that's very important for their health.
Thank you very much. And just so everyone knows, that is our Chief Operating Officer, Ursulina Ramirez. Thank you for that answer. We have another question from the same parent who wants to know, my son requires a school bus to and from school. What kind of steps are being implemented to transport children to school in a safe manner? And I know we have Sean Fitzpatrick here. He is the Senior Executive Director for the Office of Pupil Transportation. So I'm going to turn to him for that question.
And before Sean gets started, can I start that too, Adrian?
Oh yes, please do.
Okay.
Take it away.
Okay. So I want to just make sure that parents know this, that we are working day and night to make sure and try to provide transportation for our students and our families for September 10th. And when I say that, I mean literally night and day, trying to ensure that we have contracts up and ready so that we could transport students. As many of you know, and many of you not know, the Department of Education relies on a set of contracted vendors to provide transportation. We roughly have 60 vendors that we work with. Right now, we don't have any contracts solidified for the fall, but we are working diligently on contracts so that we have routes set for our students. And our highest priority is our students with disabilities and our students in temporary housing. So I want to just make sure, and I'm being radically transparent with all of you, that we do not have everything firmed up right now, but that does not mean that it's completely off the table. It is just something that we are working diligently to try to address. We are going to continue to keep you all posted and updated on our transportation plans, and we are working diligently on alternatives for our families to make sure that they can get reimbursements in case they needed to take a taxi or some other for-hire vehicle. We're also making plans to make sure that folks have Metro cards. So it is, there's a lot of work to do here, and we are here to serve you all and make sure that services are ready. But when we have busing, because we will have busing at some point, we will have busing, and when we do, it will have the proper PPE, and we will have all of the proper needs on there. So I just want to make sure that you are aware that there will be PPE available. So that includes masks for both of our students and our drivers, and hand sanitizer. So those are things that we're working on diligently. And again, as Adrian has mentioned earlier in the forum, there'll be additional forums. I will continue to be on here talking about what we're doing in terms of busing. As you guys know as well, your principals are working every single day to try to program our students. So there's just a lot of moving things. And, so there's programming, there's contracts, and making sure that we can socially distance on busing. So we will come back to you as soon as we have more information, and you can hold me accountable to have you an update for next week. Sean, do you have anything to add? Sorry if I stole all.
No, as usual, Ursulina has made my job very easy. I think she hit on all the points, and first and foremost, just to echo kind of what everyone has been reiterating throughout this proceeding, which is safety is first and foremost. And we're going to make sure that we treat buses just like an extension of the school, and that all the health, safety, and social distancing recommendations are put in place so that students and faculty and personnel will be as safe as humanly possible.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn and stay to you, Ursulina. We have more questions that covers your portfolio. And of course, your portfolio, I think, is one of the most expansive portfolios. You've got school food, busing, legal, custodians. You've got a whole array of things. So with that, going to turn to you around PPE and air quality and cleaning, because there's a lot of questions on that. And I know you've got some colleagues on the line as well. Caroline Swan from PS 147 in District 14 wants to know, how is the DOE ensuring good air quality, airflow in the schools to protect both staff and students?
Thank you. And I'm also I know I have John on the line as well, but so right over the summer, we have been working throughout the summer to just inspect and check our buildings to make sure that we have proper airflow. And that really varies. That's talking about operable windows, the right filters in place, fans, portable fans. There are tons of things that make up what is airflow in a building. And so the custodians, and as all of you know, because every school is very different. So a building from the 1920s is very different from a building from the 1970s and 80s. And for a period of time, architects were really building a lot of things without windows, and really relying on what we call mechanical airflow and HVAC. So just because your building doesn't have HVAC, it doesn't mean that that's a problem. So I just want to make sure that folks know that. But the good thing here is if it has operable windows, that is ideal for all of us and for our students. So throughout the summer, our custodians have been doing work. We did HVAC surveys. We made sure that we were looking at all of our windows to make sure that they could open and make them operable. And then as the Chancellor mentioned this past week, we kind of got additional support from a set of engineers that the School Construction Authority is contracting with to really go in and make additional observations around our building so that we could make additional repairs where necessary. And I will say this, and the Chancellor mentioned, safety is the number one thing for us. And I say this as a parent. If I don't feel comfortable putting my kids in a building, I'm not going to ask you to do the same thing. And I hope that you believe and trust that is, I'm coming from the bottom of my heart, that we are looking at these buildings in all seriousness. And if there is an issue that this action team is doing this week, right, they looked at 200 buildings on Tuesday. If there is an issue, we will fix it. If we cannot fix it, we will not put your kid in it. And I'm not saying the entire building, I'm saying the particular room, because airflow is, again, it could be a whole building issue, but really it pertains to individual rooms, and that's what we're tracking for. So I will see if John wanted to add anything there.
Sure, just a couple of things. So I also want to reassure everyone that ventilation is something that has not been ignored over the years. Our folks have always focused on it. Of course, now in the world of COVID, it's a much higher level of anxiety, so it requires a closer eye. But those people that have doing it before are still the ones that are doing it now. And you heard some of the site supervisors talk about the cleaning that was going on in the recs and the dedication of the custodial staff to those folks. Well, those are the same people that are looking at the ventilation and responsible for that as well. And they're really concerned about this, and they want to make sure that they support your children, your students, the administrators that we have. That's their job. Their job is, if they can't fix it, to let us know, and we have resources available to go in and address these things. I want to also mention something else that the Chancellor touched on in his opening remarks. We've gone out and purchased indoor air quality meters for every one of our custodians. And CO2, carbon dioxide, is an indicator of good ventilation in a room. And every custodian is going to be able to go and respond if someone has a concern. Hey, I don't know that my room has enough ventilation. We're going to be able to take CO2 readings. We've worked with the Department of Health to identify the parameters of what we feel comfortable with saying is a good reading, and that's going to be available to everybody. So even if there are things that are still going on, and of course things break every day and we need to repair them, we have multiple fallback things that we are doing to make sure that buildings remain safe as we go forward.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I have a question from a parent, Jennifer Talansky in District 6. It's a challenging question, but she wants to know, you say the ventilation systems have been upgraded, but what does that mean? Can you be more specific? And can you commit that the ventilation system has been appropriately addressed, upgraded where necessary at every school?
John, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I want to be clear about what we are doing and what we're not doing. We are not installing additional equipment other than in certain rooms. We have purchased HEPA air filtration devices, mostly for school nurse offices and isolation rooms, where we're going to have to block off the ventilation from the rest of the building to make sure that any possible contamination does not leave that room. And then we have others that are available for rooms where we might have other questions, and that might be a helpful mitigation solution for those spaces. One of the things that we are doing, I would call it an upgrade, is in certain areas where we can and where it's appropriate, we're moving from a higher filtration level. You might have heard in the news they're talking about MERV 8 filters versus MERV 13 filters. Very simply, we're putting in filters that have a higher filtration level that filter out much smaller particles down to those virus sizes. In the return air, in room air that's coming, back from the classrooms that has a potential to be contaminated. And if we can't do that, we're going to run those buildings at 100% outside air, which means the ventilation is going to be taking all the air from the outside and exhausting everything, which is about as good as you're going to get, which is very similar to what Ursulina mentioned, buildings with windows and exhaust fans, where when you can provide more air from the outside to flush those buildings out, that's the best way to handle those situations.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. We have a question. It was sent to us anonymously from a parent at PS 110 in Manhattan. And the question is, what actions have been taken regarding the cleaning of schools? Is there any special cleaning occurring, or has any special cleaning occurred to prepare for schooling? And are there additional custodians or cleaning supplies or companies for the daily cleaning of school buildings?
Sure. So I'll touch on a couple of things. Number one, like everyone else was mentioning earlier, we learned a lot from the recs. And one of the things that we learned from the recs is that having labor reassigned, a cleaner during the day to walk around, to address issues, to deal with those touch points, the doorknobs, the water fountains, the elevator buttons, those things where people are touching them all the time. We have people now reassigned to just walk around and address those things and respond to people who have issues. If there's a teacher in a classroom that says, hey, somebody sneezed in here, can you come in and wipe down the desk? Where having somebody that's available to make people feel comfortable and go address those issues. We're also providing in all the classrooms spray disinfectant or disinfectant wipes so that people in their rooms have something if they want to deal with it. They have the tools that they need to address that. We're also, as the Chancellor mentioned, purchased electrostatic sprayers, which what they do is they spray the disinfectant and it sticks to surfaces instead of having to touch them physically with a rag. It makes it much more efficient and much more even for disinfecting. So buildings are still going to be cleaned, but they're also going to be disinfected. All buildings are going to be disinfected overnight before students come back the next day.
Thank you so much for that. Chancellor, I have a question for you. This question comes from Lisa Spezio from the Tottenville High School in Staten Island, District 31. And she wants to know, is it mandatory to have the kids wear the masks while they are sitting at their desks since they are socially distancing? And also, do the pre-K students, the 4-year-olds, have to wear them all day as well?
So the answer to the first question is yes. And the way I've been explaining it to everyone is that if you are a human being, you will wear a mask in a building. So that's adults, children, everyone will wear a mask. Why? Because that's what the medical experts and the guidance says is one of the most effective ways to prevent the spread or the contamination by COVID-19 in an enclosed space. So yes, everyone will wear masks. I was very, very proud to hear our rec center supervisors talk about what they did to help. I think Deborah was talking about how they made it a game for our youngest learners, right? Why is it fun to learn to wear your mask? And why is it important to learn your mask? And I saw it firsthand when I went to visit these rec centers where you saw pre-K children with their mask on, not even blinking about it. It was just what they did. It's part of what they did to come home or to come to school. So everyone will wear a mask, and that includes students. The only exceptions, and these will be very limited circumstances, are students that have medically documented reasons why they cannot wear a mask, or students that have some other reasons. For example, a student that may be on the autistic spectrum, then we'll make some accommodations for that. Aside from that, everybody, every living human being in a building will wear a mask.
Thank you, Chancellor. There was another major announcement this week just around instruction and what the instructional day will look like. And so I'm really excited we have our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Linda Chen, with us tonight. Dr. Chen, can you provide us with a brief overview of what class scheduling will look like? And I see the Chancellor. Chancellor, you may want to do the introduction to this.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. So Dr. Chen and her team and our first Deputy Chancellor, Donald Conyers, and his team have been living with this issue. So let me just give some context. When we pivoted to remote learning in a very abrupt way in March because of the medical reasons to have to do that, we didn't have the opportunity to sit at the table with our labor partners and actually, in a very comprehensive policy way, delineate what are the roles in a remote learning situation. I want to give thanks to our CSA partners, our UFT partners, for being flexible and allowing us to go forward in order to serve our students. But with our eyes wide open coming into the fall semester, we know that there will be different learning platforms. Some students will be, and some teachers will be teaching 100% in person, or in other words, teachers will be teaching children 5 days a week in person, multiple class periods. We also know that there will be some teachers, because of medical accommodations, that will be remote teachers. So how many students does an in-person teacher get? What does the caseload look like for a remote teacher? If you're a remote teacher, look, if I'm remotely teaching a lesson, and the lesson's been designed, it's been uploaded, there are all of the resources associated with that lesson, it's not the same as being in a classroom where you have 12 children that you're teaching to directly. In a remote mode, you could ostensibly teach many more children that lesson. And then if you're partnering with other teachers, then each teacher gets a part of that group to actually do follow-up, small group instruction, answer questions, grade the assignments. So all of that takes not only negotiation, but planning and coordination with our labor partners. So what we announced today was really the fruit of many months of conversations, because the last thing that we want anyone to think is that we are abusing the work rules of our teachers. That's not what we want to do. But we also know that the circumstance is very different from any circumstance we've ever had. So we have to adapt our policies to be able to address those circumstances as well. So I'd like to ask Dr. Chen if she can just share a little more detail in parent-friendly language as to what it means, what we announced today.
Yes, so thank you, Chancellor. I think you certainly gave great top lines around that. And as the Chancellor said, we have been working for quite some time with our labor partners to be able to come to agreements so that we can have as much consistency as possible. So some of the lessons that we learned from remote learning from all of you, frankly, as families, was we really need consistency and predictability. And those were some guiding principles around what we laid out in terms of their shared values around how students will learn. So we know that certainly some of you have opted for fully remote for your child. And then some of you are going to have your child be in blended learning. So we call that, that describes when your child is going to the school building on some days and then learning at home on other days. Whether you have your student in a blended learning situation where they have both, or in a fully remote situation where they're learning every single day online using a digital device, there will be live instruction every day, synchronous. So sometimes I want to make sure I use parent-friendly language here. Synchronous means that it's real live time. So right now, this is synchronous, right? Because we are all interacting through video conferencing online. So that's one form of synchronous learning. So it is important to be able to have that live time in other ways as well. So one of the questions that we often get is, how often will my child be able to have that kind of synchronous or live learning time with a teacher? So let me talk about that for a few minutes. And I think there may be some slides here as well. And we did look at how it needs to be developmentally appropriate, right? So if you have a kindergartner or a 5-year-old, they're not going to be able to, and we can't expect them to be online engaging in the way that we are right now for as long as a high school student could. So what you'll see here is that we tried to make sure we came to agreements with our labor partners around what this would mean so that you as families have some predictability and consistency of what students would get. So I want to address the live or synchronous question first, because that is certainly one of the most common questions that we've been getting. So you'll see on this slide that we think about our earliest learners in 3K and pre-K. So when we talk about that synchronous time, I want to first talk about how in a regular classroom, in the physical classroom, for instance, there's a time where the teacher gathers all the students together and there's a lesson. Sometimes people call it a mini lesson, where they're all together and they have access to grade level content and they're learning those grade level skills together as an introduction to a concept, for instance. Then there are also times during the physical school day in a classroom where the teacher is taking a smaller group of students over to one side of the classroom and working with them on targeted skills while other students are working independently. And then there are times where the teacher is walking around the classroom and pulling up alongside students to be able to work with them one-on-one or a pair of students. Think of that same concept as moving into a digital space so that it might be a mini lesson where a teacher is here just like we are interacting, where the student is on the other end, the whole class listening and being able to engage with the teacher on video. There are other times where only smaller groups of students will work with the teacher, and other times where sometimes we call it office hours, where there's one-on-one time. So what we're showing you here, for instance, on this slide, is what that would look like. So with our 3K and pre-K, and we do appreciate our families because they obviously would need support logging in. And so one of the things that we came to an agreement on with our union partners is also that every student, families would receive in advance the schedule, so you know when it is that you need to be able to support, in this particular case, the youngest learners, support them in logging in. You'll see that it ranges from 15 to 20 minutes, say in the 3K space. And you'll see that the minutes increase a bit across the course of the year because we want to make sure, so it's not 15 minutes in one sitting, because we know, especially in September, our 3-year-olds to be able to sit in front of the screen for that long can be hard. So it may be shorter minutes at the beginning, and then it might be small groups with 10 minutes because we can engage more readily with fewer students at a time. So you'll see all of those things fall under what we call synchronous or live learning, meaning we're doing this in real time. So you'll see with pre-K, the minutes change across the course of the year as well. So when we think about a typical day, it may look like there's a morning ritual where students come together, and then there's some synchronous times where students would be working, or asynchronous times that they would be working on their own. And what's very important, and we can go on to the next slide so you can kind of quickly see also the elementary numbers. What's very important is just the live or synchronous, like working at the same time, teachers and students with each other. But an important pairing is also the asynchronous, meaning the things that I can do on my own at home. And those are the things that you would find in most typically a learning management system, or Google Classroom is what most of our schools use. So you can see then, as you look at K to 5 in the elementary schools, there's a similar cadence, and math and English language arts would be taught every single day. And then science and social studies, the equivalent of 3 to 4 times per week. Some schools teach science all in one week, and then social studies another week. And then music, art, physical education would also be then combined. So you can quickly go on to the next slide, which is our middle schools. And you'll see that developmentally the times and the number of minutes move up. And then if we can go to high school, you'll also see those change, those number of minutes as well. So I want to underscore a couple of other things that are important in the agreement that we reached. Not only will there be schedules posted in advance so that families can really count on that, there will also be part of a teacher's day, 20 minutes every day dedicated to being able to connect with families as well. We know that that was something that many of you asked for. Our teachers worked very hard to engage students and sometimes in many hours beyond their day. And it was hard to be able to be in sync sometimes with families. So we have that as part of our time. What the Chancellor also talked about was if your child is in blended learning, they would be seeing a teacher in school because the teacher is the on-site teacher, but they would also collaborate with the teacher that the child would be meeting with on their days at home. And so part of that is a coordination time that typically would happen before the school day begins for students between those teachers. So those teachers could work together not only to share what is being taught, but to ensure that there's continuity between what your child learned one day and to connect it to what they would learn one day inside this classroom and one day at home with the teacher remotely. So those are some top lines of our instructional guidelines that were released today.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Chen, and for your hard work in getting us to a place where we have really strong program for students in the fall. We have a question here from a parent, Linda Mueller from PS 150 in District 30. And I think you answered the first part of her question around wanting to understand more about how remote instruction will be structured. But the second part of her question is how will teachers be supported in delivering remote instruction? So gonna turn to both you and the Chancellor for those questions.
So Dr. Chen, this is the world that you've been living in, so I'll let you take this one.
Okay, yes. So we talked a little bit about the instructional coordination time between teachers, but also the Chancellor actually referenced it earlier. Part of the supports that we're providing for teachers are also around consistency of curriculum and materials, so that you can imagine we have teachers now who are teaming together, coordinating instruction. So we want to make sure that we set them up for success and give them and provide them the instructional supports and materials so that they can be able to teach and stay in sync on the lessons. Also, technology and using technology to teach and learn is also a huge part of all of this. And we had been providing professional development during remote learning, but we will continue to do that because the skills are endless in terms of the innovation that we could employ to engage students. And that is something that we will continue to offer as well for teachers around professional learning in terms of how to not just use video conferencing, but there are also very innovative applications where students in real time can be able to respond with their avatar and those kinds of things so that there's interaction even in real time through other means, not just video.
Thank you so much. I have a question from Brandy Odorogo from District 12 in the Bronx, and she wants to know, how flexible will the remote learning days of blended learning be? Will it be like before where the child has a set of work and can do it at their own pace as long as they submit the work by a certain time? And here's a second question that I think I'll give to the Chancellor, because this is not you, Dr. Chen. Does the school have any special discounts for kids' masks, family trips to the museum, or anything that can help supplement their kids' education? This is all one question from Brandy. Thank you for the question. So we'll start with Dr. Chen, and then Chancellor, you can take it from there.
So I think one thing that will certainly be different from remote learning, and again, it's like the Chancellor said, we went immediately into remote learning and didn't really have the runway to be able to establish all these new structures. And so the class schedules, I think I mentioned before, would be something that would be posted for families in advance. We know that is incredibly important. And what we've also been doing is making sure, when I talked about Google Classroom or that learning platform that the students would be using, the information and all the learning objects that a student would need with their assignments and other videos that they may watch or interactive activities would all be in one place. So there would be, of course, some flexibility around the asynchronous or things that don't have to be done in real time together. And that way, families, we know also that families have different schedules, and you might be able to make the synchronous times during a few times, across the day, but then you may need to be able to schedule other times, even in the evenings, to work on the asynchronous or work that's not done at the same time with the teacher or other students. So I think that in some ways, yes, there will be flexibility in terms of the asynchronous work, but also there will be more predictability and consistency around when to log in.
Yeah, and I would only add to what Dr. Chen has said is that the key for us is to try to build as much consistency for parents and students and predictability, while still recognizing that there needs to be flexibility, especially in a blended learning environment, because we know every family has different dynamics. So I think that, and I want to give a lot of credit and a lot of kudos to Dr. Chen and her team, our first deputy chancellor and his team, our labor relations folks, and our unions for really thinking about this, not just from the very square work rules conversation, but really trying to give that flexibility to our families. Now, the second part of the question, I love that second part of the question. And colleagues, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've talked about discounts to museums and different kinds of discounts and passes. I think that's a marvelous idea. I just texted our CEO for the Fund for Public Schools, because I think that's something that our philanthropic and business community could really get around, helping us develop some of those discounts and some of those opportunities as the city begins to open up for our families to take their children out as well.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. And speaking of which, we have our first Deputy Chancellor, Donald Conyers, with us. It is, I think, your first family and student information session as first Deputy Chancellor. Welcome. We're happy to have you. And with that, we're going to turn a question to you. We have a question from Maximo Muniz from PS 69Q in District 30. And Maximo wants to know, if you choose remote learning and try to switch into blended learning, when is the deadline to call or register? I'm hearing it's a first come, first serve. If I want my child to attend in class, but have some concerns, can I wait it out and return in November if there's no issues in school?
So thank you for having me tonight. I'm happy to be here. And if I understand the question, we're talking about the ability to move from remote learning into blended learning. Is that correct, Deputy Chancellor?
That's right.
So yes, and I know parents are concerned about that, and many parents have been waiting and wanting to see how things unfold. So for parents that want to switch from remote learning to blended learning, we are asking for your patience and your understanding as schools organize and make sure that they are stable and following all of the health and safety regulations. And we've established certain times for parents to switch from remote learning into blended learning. There'll be information and you can sign up in November. So we'll be starting school in September. The first opportunity to come back into a hybrid model will be in November. We'll be sending out more information in the coming months on how you can do so. And for families that want to switch from blended learning, from the hybrid model to remote learning, you can do so at any time. And the reason for that is when we are switching from remote into a hybrid model, we have to account for all of the things like physical distancing and the space capacity and making sure that we are prepared and ready to receive our students and still maintain all of the things that we need to maintain as per the health and safety guidelines. Where conversely, if you're going from the hybrid blended learning model into remote learning, we reduce a lot of the instances of health and safety concerns, because we now have students that are in a remote environment and still physically distancing if they need to, but certainly they are not contributing to health causes or calamities for themselves. Hope that I've answered that for you, Adrian.
You did. Thank you so much for that, First Deputy Chancellor.
Thank you.
And we are coming to time. We're actually time for one last question. And Chancellor, the question is for you. The question comes from one of our students, Alex. It's a student from District 1 in Manhattan. And Alex wants to know, do we have to attend school if we don't want to?
Alex, really nice try, Alex. I appreciate that. Way to go. Nice try. Yes, you have to attend school. It's not optional. You will be attending school. The only difference is, will you be attending in person and then part of the week blended, or will you be attending 100% remote? But yes, you have to attend school, and we will be checking, we will be calling, we will be knocking on your door if you don't connect. But yes, Alex, we can't wait to see you. All kidding aside, we really can't wait to see you. We can't wait to have you with us if you're in our blended learning situation. And we can't wait to connect with you on our screen if you're in a remote learning situation. But yes, we want to see you. We want to interact with you. Yes, we'll see you in September, but good try.
Thank you for that. I just want to take a moment to thank all of my colleagues. I see we've got executive superintendents with us. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to Cabinet for being here, senior DOE staff for being here. Always thank you. It's a pleasure, Chancellor. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for parting words.
Again, I just want to thank everybody that you just thanked, Adrian, all of our executive soups that are on, all the cabinet members, senior leaders. Thank you. Look, we all are parents, or we're educators for a very long time. We would not put our children in a situation that we would ask you to put your children in if we didn't feel 100% that they're going to be safe, they're going to be taken care of. This is our commitment. This is why we do what we do. And I can tell you that the people that you've heard from today, including our principals, our site administrators, could be doing a lot of other things, making a lot more money than being in the education field. But they do it because they have a passion for serving children and serving our community. So we will never, ever, ever do anything that will put our children or our staff in harm's way. That's our solemn commitment to you. We're going to continue to give you information as information becomes available. This is fast moving. It's fast developing. The mayor, I'm going to quote the mayor, we are in liftoff mode. So things are going to be happening quickly. Again, if you have questions, make sure you call 311, you check the website, or you check in with your principal, because they are the ones that are the experts at their school sites. But more than anything, thank you to all of my fellow New Yorkers, because if it wasn't for the work that you have done and took us from March being the epicenter of the epicenter in the United States of community spread to where we are right now, less than 1% community spread. We are the envy of the country. And it has put us in the position of being the only large school system in America even able to consider in-person learning because of the work that you've done. So let's show people what New York does. We never say give up. We always say we can do this. There's nothing too tough, nothing too big for us to take on. This is one of those moments. So again, thank you for being with us. Thank you to all of my colleagues. Please take care of yourselves, and let's take care of each other. And we'll see you again very soon.